I am joined here today by a dear friend of mine. I call her Sam. You can call her Sam if she says so. But Sam is going to talk to us today about the intersection of fashion and social responsibility. She actually was the first person to truly introduce me to the concept. And I think to watch her career take off and to watch her explore everything that has been of interest to her through a career is that's awesome. And that's one thing we aspire for each of you to be able to do. So again, this session is being recorded. If you have any questions, let us know. Sam, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone and then we'll get started with the discussion.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Imani and Tara, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. So, I'm Sam. You guys can all call me that too. After college, I moved to San Francisco to work for Gap Inc. I was part of their rotational management program, and I worked for their Athleta brand. So, it's kind of like Lululemon if you haven't heard of Athleta before. I spent 10 months there before going to work for a nonprofit and helping them run their annual conference. And then from there, during that period, I moved to Portland, Oregon, which is where I am based today. I'm from New Jersey originally. And in Portland, I've done a few different things. Most recently, I was working with a startup that is a e-commerce marketplace that sells socially responsible brands and products. I left that role in January, and now I am pursuing a fudge company. So we will get into all of that throughout this conversation, but that's a pretty broad introduction to who I am and what I do.
Which is great because I was going to say, going from being a high school student to an entrepreneur is definitely not something that happens overnight. So I think kind of starting from the beginning, why don't you tell us all about kind of your high school experience?
Sure. So I went to high school in New Jersey, and my high school was a technical school, had specializations. So I was a fashion design and merchandising student there. I think when most girls are around, 10 or so, you're like, oh, I really want to be a fashion designer. And for me, I really enjoyed being creative. So the idea of going into fashion design was really exciting for me, and that stuck with me. So for high school, I was able to do that, and I had all my regular classes as well, but spent some time learning to sew. We would put on a fashion show every year. That was like our final project. And throughout that, I learned, well, I had that interest, one, but then I also had this general interest in sustainability from my childhood, just growing up, being interested in recycling and being outdoors and nature and animals. And so in high school, I kind of had the ability to, or I had the light bulb went off that I could combine my interests in sustainability and in the fashion industry, because the fashion industry touches sustainability in so many ways that as a general consumer, you may not realize on a daily basis.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, we can go into that in a little bit, but I
So
got to do fashion
in
in
high
high
school and you're like, I know I love fashion, I know I love sustainability, and now I am, for your school, they had a program, right? And so like that's huge because a lot of people don't have programs. But what's so awesome about each of the attendees here today and those who will watch this for New York City high school girls and just New York City high schoolers in general, there are specialized programs. And so would you recommend that people look for programs that specialize in their passions and their interests?
Absolutely. But I would also add that it's not always a be all end all. So my high school had a lot of different types of specializations in one place. So there was an automotive major, there was a culinary arts one, and so many of the skills that you could learn in each of these majors are just transferable life skills in
Right.
general. So doing fashion was amazing, and some of my friends went on to design school. I personally did not. What I learned is that I did not want to be a fashion designer. But it gave me a really good understanding of what goes into making a garment and how to kind of ways to think about the fashion industry.
Yeah,
So
I think that's a really important thing I don't think I've ever discussed. And for all of you who are on this call, think about some of the tangible skills you're able to walk away from. My high school was also a CTE school in New York City. And prior to high school, I had never played a sport in my life, but I was at the business of sports school. And I really took as much as I could um, from the business management portion of our program, right? Our school was based in entrepreneurship and business management. Fast forward, I'm clearly in law school, but I'm taking an entrepreneurship law and policy class that directly reflects some of the tangible skills I got offered through my program. So for those of you in your programs, even if your interests are changing, I think it's important to consider what are the skills that I'm walking away from. So as you're thinking about the skills you're getting in your high school as your interests were growing, what about the opportunities that you sought out?
yeah, so one of I think the best things about being a student is you're able to really reach out to people and say, I'm a high school student and I'm interested in this, and that you stand out because of that. And a lot of people are willing to give you their time because they want to help you, and know that you may not have that many resources or that much like training in that space, generally. So I used to look up different conferences that were happening. And so that could have been from different schools in my area. They were having certain speakers come that open to the public, or organizations just generally having some, conferences. And right now, since everything's pretty much on Zoom, it's so much easier to
Right.
access these different things.
Wait, can you
Um,
a few of the conferences just in case for those who are here, in these sessions, these are people who are specifically interested in fashion and social responsibility. Could you name maybe three, and Tara tends to put in the chat the links for them. So could you name specifically some of the conferences?
I don't know. I can name some generally, or some brands that I think are doing really cool things.
Okay.
Um, but thinking back to things that I attended while I was in high school, um, Horace Mann had a social entrepreneurship conference. I don't know if they're still doing it, um, but that was the first time I think I was really exposed to the word social entrepreneurship, which really has been a guiding light in my career. And so social entrepreneurship, if you're not familiar, is using business as a force for good. So um, having a triple bottom line, they say. So it's people. So you want to serve people in the communities, profit, because a business needs to make money to be able to be sustainable, to keep it going and continue creating that good, and planet. So considering, your environmental impact as well. So really, how can you use business to make a difference in the world? And so that was the first time I was ever introduced to that term, and a lot of amazing speakers from different organizations were there. And I had the ability to go up and talk to them afterwards and ask them questions. And some of the people that were there, it's been funny to see where they've continued to go in their career. So Andrew Yang was actually a speaker there, who's now running for mayor, I think, of New York, and had run for president as well. So he was there with Venture for America, which is his organization that he had founded.
What is Venture?
So I met him.
What is Venture for America?
Venture for America, don't fully quote me on this because I am not a rep for Venture for America, but it's a program for students graduating college who want to go and start their own businesses. It's, I believe, some sort of like grant program where you have a lot of support launching those businesses and resources and such. But it's kind of like Teach for America or those other, oh, perfect, the link's in there. So if you want to read more about Venture for America, check out the link that Tara just sent to the chat.
No, that's actually, I'm like, wow, I've never heard of that. Um, So you were looking
So
for opportunities through conferences, events, and I think the overall takeaway for sure for everyone is like if there's a company that you're interested in, they're probably offering a virtual program. And Sam, something that we could highlight is the fact that some of these conferences used to cost a lot of money and now they're free.
exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing to add is, especially if it's a talk or conversation or conference that's not geared towards high school students, one of my favorite questions to ask if they did a Q&A was like, what would you tell your 17-year-old self? Or however old I was, because sometimes you may be the youngest person in the room, and that can be scary. But also, when you put yourself out there and you ask that question, then people are like, oh, wow, look at this go-getter. Like, I want to talk to them after. And like, you can go up to the speaker after, or, connect further. And oftentimes they're willing to help you more. So definitely get yourself out there when you may feel a little nervous because you're the youngest person in the room, but like realize that that can be to your advantage, because once you're older and you graduate college, like you can't ask those sorts of questions, and everyone else is fighting for those same, moments to talk to them. So it helps when you have that edge.
I like that idea of, regardless of who's in the room, whether that be virtually or not, really making sure that you're seen and you're heard and people want to invest in you. Sam, I have to be completely honest. I also had a very similar tactic, right? When I would go to events. Um, some of these opportunities come through extracurriculars, though, right? Like guest speakers and sessions. So, could you talk a bit about what you did in high school that played maybe a direct role or had some influence on your career in fashion, but also what you're doing right now as an entrepreneur?
For sure. So my freshman year of high school, my brother was a senior at the same school, and one of his friends who had been in the fashion program was starting an organization called AIM, which stood for Action is Magnanimous. And so the whole idea was that we kind of we made like a bunch of circle scarves, and like feather earrings were really big when I was in high school. And so we would craft doing these different types of things, or like paper beaded bracelets and earrings. And we would sell those to our fellow students, buy them for our family, for the holidays and whatnot. And the money that we raised, we donated to kiva.org, which is really what my introduction to social entrepreneurship was. The social entrepreneurship conference had the CEO of Kiva at the time speaking at it. So the one I had mentioned before at Horace Mann. So that was incredible, because then I was able to talk to the CEO about the fact that I had a Kiva club through AIM. And that actually, if you're following this, hopefully it's not sounding too disjointed. When I was able to meet the CEO, I went up to him and I told him that at this point, I was a senior in high school. So I'd been running the club since when I was a freshman, that senior graduated. So I'd been running the club for 3 years. I went up to the CEO and I was like, I run a Kiva club. I absolutely adore Kiva. And Kiva gives out microloans. So you can donate in $25 increments to these loans in a lot of different places, honestly. And it can be for school costs. It can be for getting a plow so that families can, use their cattle to do that and farm better. And their whole thing is like, you can, they'll say, you can teach a man, you can give a man a fish and he eats for a day. You can teach a man to fish and he eats, forever. There's what they would say is, what if he just needs a net, but he doesn't have the funding to get the net? So it's like Kiva helps you get, helps that person buy the net so that they can then fish and, have successfully, I guess, make money and support their family and then their community. So that's what Kiva does. So I went to this conference, met the CEO, went up to him afterwards, told him that I ran this Kiva club. To me, it was like meeting a celebrity. I have like a photo with him that's on a blurry iPod Touch. It's a blurry iPod Touch picture that I still have, and it's so overexposed and just bad. Um, and met him and told him about it. And he invited me out to San Francisco. So from New Jersey to San Francisco, like 2 weeks later, to see the Kiva offices. And they were doing a conference based on like how to use Kiva within education. And so 2 weeks after I met him, I had an all expenses paid trip to San Francisco to participate in this just because I
You
went up to him.
you went up to him and you spoke to him. And I think a lot of people don't realize, yes, we're virtual. Yes, there was a pandemic, but people are so willing to invest in a young person if you ask, if you say, I'm interested in doing this. And you were invited on a trip, let alone directly speaking to the direct, like the CEO. So that's huge.
Yeah.
This is
And so I went on this trip, and it was funny. My mom wouldn't even let me fly across the country by myself. So because it would be my first trip by myself. So like my brother had to take time off from college to like make this trip with me and everything. But it was the best. And so there were other high school and college students and educators. There were 150 people at this little summit. And actually, some of the people that I met there, this was in 2013, are like my best friends to this day. It was just such an incredible experience. And from that time too, I met so many people who worked for Kiva, and I keep in touch with them. So they've now moved on to different organizations, and we're all adults now, which is really weird. We like got brunch in San Francisco together a couple years ago. But it, yeah, just really, really incredible experience. And it was just because I like went up and told them what I was doing. They ended up writing multiple blog posts about me and my club. It was really great.
so I think I personally feel like you had a wonderful uh, high school experience. I'm curious to know if we were to pull a you on you and ask, Samantha Kirsch, the ninth grader in high school, what would you tell her? What would you say to her?
So
Knowing what you know now, being where you are, I mean, of course, we haven't fully gone into the rest of your journey, and we're going to see that as we transition. But before we move on to college, Samantha, what would you tell ninth grade Samantha?
I would probably say, um, to a degree, like continue doing what you're doing. Because I think that I was raised in a way that allowed me to um, kind of like question authority in a healthy way, and really kind of like take ownership of my own life and what I wanted to do. And so in high school, I found out about a couple grant programs. And so I won multiple grants for our school to start a recycling program, and then put in the water bottle filling stations places, and worked with the parent partnership organizations like our PTA club to get reusable water bottles for all students. And I think that I always felt empowered to do those things. And I think that throughout my life, but even just throughout high school, I've run into some blocks where people haven't liked me because like people who are teachers and such like haven't liked me because I speak up for what I believe we should have access to, or I'm almost taking charge, and maybe as a student, I shouldn't be as in charge, I guess I'm trying to be, or something like that. And I've always kind of come out of those situations like so frustrated when, what even has gone down, if there's some sort of negative feeling at the end of it, but also knowing that at the end of the day, I stayed true to myself and continue to make a positive impact. Um, and so I think just telling myself, like, don't let other people get you down. Like, just keep doing what you're doing, and keep asking questions and talking to people who may eventually be able to help you one day.
I like that. I like that asking, requesting. Don't be afraid to reach out to people. And for those of you, there's a lot to get out of this conversation, but one for sure is do not be afraid to ask. And right now, with the pandemic, this is hard for everyone, but there are some accessibility points that are no longer being held back from you because of age or because of your resources. So this is a very unique time to ask and to request. Um, and you're at home, so you don't have to worry about it being necessarily an unpaid internship. If that's an issue, you can always request grants, right? So we know to reach out to Sam for grant writing. Um, but I think as we think about how you employed all of those kind of pieces of advice, how did you decide where to go to college? How did you choose your college? And what you haven't said is Sam actually started out at one college and then transferred to another. So why don't you discuss kind of that process and your whys?
Yeah, before I get into that, I'm going to just add the best piece of advice that I've ever received is that the answer is always no if you don't ask.
Mhm.
So you can get a no after you've asked, but if you're not even going to ask, then the answer is immediately no.
Yep,
So you can take that risk and ask the question. And if it's no, you're just back where you started.
exactly.
So,
The worst thing that could happen is no.
and again, it's a lot easier to ask those questions when you still have the title of student. So, once you're more in the professional world, it's sometimes more difficult to have people do favors for you if you just have, general questions and such. But as a student, you really get more flexibility there.
Yeah. So
College.
years of college, we know you love fashion. We know you love um, social responsibility and social entrepreneurship. And by the way, for those of you who are here with us, if you have questions in real time, you can ask and we will divert the conversation. If you have a question for high school, what does it mean to be interested in fashion? Like, feel free to just jump in. So tell us about your college process and what you learned, and maybe what you would have done a little differently.
Yeah. So my brother is 3 years older than me. And when he was looking at colleges, it was every single family vacation, every single school break, we drove and looked at colleges. So he visited 27 schools.
Of course.
Imani knows my brother as well. He visited 27 colleges. And so by the time he had visited 27 colleges, and I had probably been to probably a little over 20 of those visits, I did not want to go visit colleges. um, when we had visited colleges for him, we had gone to Ithaca, New York, and we had visited Cornell University, and I fell in love. I was probably an eighth grader. Maybe it was the summer between eighth grade and ninth. Um, but it was August, I still remember, and it was beautiful. And the campus was just gorgeous. And Ithaca, the town it's in, was just coolest ever. And so I was like, I want to go to school, to college in Ithaca, New York.
But
And I
wait,
was,
wait 1 second. Let's take a pause. All right.
yeah.
In a virtual world, what do we say to our students who can't go on these tours or don't have older siblings like myself? How do you recommend that they get to learn about these different colleges?
Absolutely. That's a great question.
Community colleges, 2-year colleges,
Yeah.
4-year schools. What are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I'm not in the high school game right now, but I imagine that there, with the virtual world we're currently living in, there are probably a lot of conferences where you can probably Zoom calls somewhat like this with different colleges giving, virtual tours of a sense or providing, information. Um, you can reach out to people who have gone to those colleges. So if you kind of are searching, for example, I mean, I'm kind of looking at grad school and social impact stuff. So I've just Googled best grad programs for social impact and lists come up. And so if there's something you may be interested in, you can Google those lists as a starting point, kind of see where those colleges are. Um, do some research on their websites, maybe look at their social media accounts, see what they're offering, and then you can always reach out to people through, if you have a LinkedIn, I highly suggest getting LinkedIn, but you can reach out to people who have gone to those colleges, maybe look for recent grads or students who are currently there
And
to
these,
see.
and these places will often set you up with alumni. Like they will set
Yeah.
up for you. But Sam, I think um, yes, you've talked about how Ithaca is gorgeous, but can you talk about Cornell is just another school, and I don't want anyone here. I know that we always have Cornellians with us. I don't want anyone here to feel that you have to go to Cornell. I want you to speak to what you studied at Cornell and why. Like you were interested in Cornell because you had visited, but
Well, I'll get well, so anyway, let me continue my story. So at Cornell on the tour, I found out about their fashion program. And so they had a this is again still well with my brother when I was an eighth or ninth grader. I guess then probably an eighth grader. Um, they had a fiber science and apparel design management program, and they had a big fashion show every year that the students could participate in, and it was a pretty big event. They would get like 3,000 people to it. And yeah, the students put it all together, and it just seemed so interesting. And they talked about how like design influences your daily life. And so you may feel better if like you dress up for yourself or something. You put on your favorite outfit. Or like how you fit in your chair could influence your day and how productive you are. And I'm sure everyone is learning that even more through having to be on Zoom calls and doing virtual school or anything else like that, how that's really impacting you. But your whole environment impacts your life. And so the program that I heard about at Cornell, that was this fashion program. It was in the School of Human Ecology, which talked about how design affects your life. And I just thought it was such an interesting concept of how to think about things. And they talked a lot about sustainability. And so from that moment on, I was like, I want to go to Cornell. So senior year of college, um, wouldn't
high
necessarily, oh, go ahead.
senior of high school.
Sorry, yeah, senior year of high school. Thank you. Um, Thinking about applying to colleges, I was so burnt out from everything my brother had done that I only applied to 3 schools. I don't necessarily suggest that that's the best course of action, um, but I applied to Cornell. I applied to Ithaca College, which is another beautiful campus and great school in Ithaca, New York. And I applied to Binghamton. And I visited each of those schools after, like, again, like after my brother, I visited those. But what I kind of realized after the fact is that I only applied to, yeah, three colleges, which college admissions are difficult. Um, and they were all within an hour of each other. So it became I guess I really like upstate New York. um, so I applied early decision to Cornell in their fiber science program. I was deferred. Also, as a high school student, knowing I wanted to go to Cornell the whole time, everyone kind of knew I really wanted to go to Cornell. So it was really heartbreaking when I didn't get accepted right away. Thankfully, everyone else at my school who applied early decision also was not accepted right away. So that was kind of made things a little bit better, but it was still just really sad and disappointing. And so I was deferred, which means that your application goes back into the normal admissions pool, and you find out when the normal people who apply with a normal timeline when they find out. So typically it's March, late March, maybe early April. Um, so in the meantime, I was accepted to Ithaca College, and I had applied to different majors at every school. So at Ithaca College, I applied to communication management and design, which is kind of marketing, but it's also organization focused, nonprofits. A lot of people would go on to work for, a lot of event management. So those are all things I really enjoyed doing. They weren't fashion, but they were still in that like social responsibility. You can do it for any industry type of, like path. So I liked that a lot. So I applied to that school and I was accepted. And I was like, that's awesome. That's cool. And then Binghamton, I was also accepted. But I joined, I don't know what the popular thing is to do now, but I joined the Facebook group, and just the conversations happening in the Facebook group. I was like, I don't really want to be a part of this at Binghamton. So I did not accept Binghamton's offer. Um,
Also, really great SUNY school for
yeah,
those of you
really
who
great school, and I know so many people who have loved their time there. So yeah, I was excited to apply there, and I liked it a lot when I visited. Just
my fun fact, my high school assistant principal met her husband there when they were first years, literally like the first day of college. And they are very married and have children. So, you can find love in Binghamton.
yeah, I know so many people who have loved their Binghamton experience.
Yeah.
I think my major I applied to there was either environmental science or anthropology. Um, I was a little all over the place with what I applied for in colleges, and I suggest doing a lot of research into career tracks for people, like Google, like career tracks for environmental science majors or whatever it is that you're interested in, because that kind of helped inform what I wanted to apply for. Um, because I was interested in anthropology, the study of people. I thought that sounded so interesting. But really, what I think I was interested in was developmental sociology,
That was my
which
major.
is slightly different.
Yes.
Um, so that's kind of, I guess, more how systems affect people. Would you agree with that, Imani?
Yes. More so, yes. Systems, financial, cultural, societal. Yes.
Yeah. So that was just kind of funny because anthropology can be actually like in a dig site, like getting, finding bones. Like that could be like that, the study of people, versus I was more interested in like how communities interact and like civilizations like form, and I don't know.
They
It was a
just
little different.
they just recently, for those of you who are interested in anthropology, although I know many of you who are attending today are interested mainly in fashion, they just found this 100-year-old Native American girl. So that's fun, I guess, as an anthropologist. But
Yeah.
for those of you interested in fashion, I'm sure that is not the major of choice.
But that's the other thing is when I was looking at colleges, I guess I should call out that I didn't apply to any design schools. And the reason I didn't apply to any design schools is I knew that fashion was an interest of mine, but I worried about going to a school that focused so heavily on fashion that I felt like I couldn't shift industries easily. And so that's why I ended up, so anyway, I guess like I got transfer option from Cornell, which means they accept you for the following year. So I had to go to a different school for my first year of college, and I ended up at Ithaca College, which we'll get into in a second. But I forget where my thought was going with this.
Yeah,
But
about the opportunities of like being intentional about choosing a
yeah,
major and looking at colleges and design programs. For those of you, like, again, this session is called Fashion and Social Responsibility, and part of that is because Sam rests heavily on the social responsibility part, and knew that she loved fashion. It's always been her passion. So, you know, the priority was more so the social responsibility part of it. And I think for you, if you're here and your priority is the fashion part of it, there are programs that are tailored just to the design, just to some of the opportunities that you might look for. Not saying that you can't incorporate social responsibility. Again, like Sam said, she worked at Athleta. She's worked at various companies whose sole functions are to integrate social responsibility and fashion. But we're in college, and we'll get to that when we talk about her career. But yes.
Yes, exactly. So that's why I didn't personally apply to any design schools. I also didn't have an interest in going to school like in New York City, which there are so many design schools in New York. Um, and so, yeah, that was kind of my thought process there. But if you are highly interested in actually becoming a fashion designer, um, I do suggest going to a design school. I just knew I wanted to be more on the communications, events, sort of like in the industry, but not doing fashion design. So that's why I personally chose not to apply to any design
Is
schools.
Parsons a really great school for design?
Yeah, Parsons, FIT,
Yes.
um, those would be the ones that definitely stand out for me uh, for New York City. But I actually had growing up it was like Teen Vogue fashion handbook or something, and they profiled different creative or different people who had roles in the fashion industry, and it was really interesting to me because it kind of talked to you about what they did, what each role sort of did.
Yeah.
I feel like I should go back to this. I haven't looked at it since I was a high schooler.
I mean, what you're saying immediately takes me to Elaine Welteroth, right? Who, if you don't know who she is, I strongly recommend that you pick up your phone and just,
At Gap Inc. while I was there.
you met her?
Well, I didn't meet her, but it was in the room with her.
Oh my gosh. Okay, guys, she was the first like black woman editor in chief of Teen Vogue, right? So she's great. And I think that's another thing to talk about, right? Like, how do you have a social impact in the fashion industry if you're not the one designing? And there are so many roles. And so I want us to talk about your college experience because your career has actually been in many of those roles. So yeah, let's talk about your time at Ithaca College and transferring to Cornell.
Yes, last statement I'm going to make though, that handbook had a list of schools in different places that had like fashion majors and stuff. So
Kara,
that's
put it in the group.
another place
It's in the
that
group chat. Please check it out.
yes. Okay, so went to Ithaca College. Ithaca College is a smaller school. There's only about 4,000 students. Um, and it's on the hill directly across from Cornell. So you can view Cornell from Ithaca College, and that was kind of tough emotionally to see the place that I wanted to be from my dorm room window. But I have to say that Ithaca College was an amazing, amazing experience. The nicest people I've ever met, I met at Ithaca College.
Yeah.
Um,
Great people, great faculty members. I know a lot of people who
yeah,
teach at college. It's pretty awesome.
such a great school.
Yeah.
I had a really, really good time. Everyone's so caring. And I was in the honors program there. And something about me, which if you guys know Imani at all, we're a little similar in the sense that we do a lot of different things and we have trouble sometimes saying no. And so I went to a club fest, the first few weekends of school and learned about all these different clubs and joined like 9 of them
Oh my.
and went to
For the record, I
all the meetings for
don't
all of those clubs.
please don't do that. I always tell people stick to 2 to 3 things. I do have a problem saying no, so I have to look at all my options first. I would have gone to all 9 meetings and then I would have chosen only 2 to 3. Pick 2 to 3 things, whether that be virtually or in person, and then grow with those things. Do not take on
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So I did a lot of different stuff, but the main thing that really stood out to me was I joined this club there called Net Impact. And so this will allow us to kind of transition a bit into career as well. But Net Impact is an organization that's kind of an umbrella organization that talks about social responsibility and helps get those resources to students. So they have undergraduate chapters, graduate chapters, and professional chapters. And I think there are over 400 chapters globally. So was introduced to this organization at Ithaca College. And if I'm being completely honest, I joined because they had a really cute president. And I was like, oh, this boy is so cute. And I was interested in the topic as well. But I did not miss any meetings. And when I knew I was transferring to Cornell, I didn't want to lose this experience that I had had with this club that meant so much to me.
Yeah.
So I reached out and found that there was a graduate chapter at Cornell, and that chapter leader, the advisor, the faculty member, was willing to help me start the undergraduate chapter. So at Cornell, it was called Sustainable Enterprise Association, which is what you see in the picture here. Um, I met some of these people through Facebook groups about Cornell, transfer student things, or the guy in the photo I had a job with off campus. So that's how we had met. But they started this club with me my first semester on campus at Cornell. And it's a little ambitious, but we did it. And I ran that chapter for the 3 years I was there. And I got to go to their conference every year, and it was just such an incredible experience. And that impact really allowed you to make the chapter whatever you wanted it to be. So we had a lot of different presentations on social responsibility in fashion, and we talked about that. And we had ones on food systems, and we had ones on all different types of things. And it was an amazing experience. And that was my main extracurricular at Cornell. So I definitely went from 9 clubs to like 1, which is a much, much better option. You can find what you want to do and then really focus on that. So that was my college experience. Imani, is there anything else you want me to touch on for college?
No, I think that was really great. And I think we'll see how net impact played a role into starting your career. Also, although you're from New Jersey, I noticed the bridge behind you. So, I think we can just kind of kick off with you had been flown out, and I don't think we ever talked about this, right? You were flown out to the West Coast in high school for an opportunity to learn about fashion and to see how social responsibility played a role. Did you feel like you had to go to the West Coast? Because that's also where you started your career. So, let's talk about is social responsibility only a thing in the West Coast when we have the fashion district right here in New York? Confused.
So I think when I was looking at schools and such, and a few years ago, it was much bigger on the West Coast.
Mm.
I think that within the last few years, there has been a ton of social responsibility stuff happening on the East Coast as well and in New York. Athleta's offices are in San Francisco. So during my senior year of college, I was recruited by Gap Inc. To be a part of their rotational management program. I had a job offer before Thanksgiving my senior year, which is really rare and really, really lucky.
How did you find out about that? Because I've never heard of the program.
So the program itself, you would rotate through 3 different functions, they called them. So you did merchandising, inventory management, which is kind of like how many pieces should you buy of each clothing item for each store. So a lot of math and Excel, Microsoft Excel stuff is really difficult for me. It's not really my thing. And then production, which is working with the designers and the merchandisers to come up with items that will sell well, and then working with the factories overseas to actually create that item.
So wait, did you
And so,
on your own or Cornell introduced you to Gap?
so um, my brother had a friend who he had met. My brother also went to Cornell. My brother had a friend who was in the program, and she came back to campus to recruit. So a lot of the times in college, when there are job fairs, alumni of the school will come back to the school to recruit for different roles.
Right.
And so she came back, and my brother was like, you should talk to her. I think you'd be interested in learning more about the program. And I've been really hesitant to apply for fashion rotational programs because there are a few out there. Bloomingdale's has one. I think Macy's might have one. American Eagle has one. There are a lot of different programs out there. But to me, I wanted to do social responsibility, and those were very focused on mostly marketing, I'd say, that side of things for the fashion industry. And I didn't really want to do that part. So my brother's friend was
Oh,
there. Her name's Laura.
and Sam, I just want to highlight really quickly for those of you who might want to be on the design side of things. Sam just informed me, like Gap, you said Neiman Marcus. Who else?
So Gap has one. I think Bloomingdale's has one. American Eagle has one. I think Victoria's Secret may have one. There are a lot of different rotational programs out there for the fashion industry
And
for
these are
when
for college
you're in
students.
college.
For college students. Okay. So you're
Yeah.
realizing, hey, this is great, but this isn't what I necessarily want to do.
Yeah, I'm like, these are really awesome programs, and a lot of them are very well known and respected programs. Gap Inc. has like a 2% acceptance rate. They like really are like, this is the best program out there, which was a lot of honor that I then was accepted into it. I found, so when I was speaking to Laura, I told her what my concerns were with these programs. And she said, look at Athleta. We really care about sustainability. We really care about social responsibility. I think you'd love it. So I did, and it was really what I liked. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is perfect. So throughout the whole recruitment process and the different interviews, I always focused on sustainability. I always added that extra bit
Mm.
that was my own interest. And it's okay if sustainability or social responsibility isn't your interest. Do you have another little thing that you think is cool? Like, add that in. So they kept telling me that sustainability made me stand out because no one else was adding so much of it into their programs or into their interviews and such. So I stood out as an applicant because of my focus in it. What I learned, so I moved to San Francisco after graduation, hence the photo of me by the Golden Gate Bridge, because that's where Athleta's offices are. Um, and I guess I want to also quickly add is that I had called this woman that I connected with who used to work at Nordstrom in their social responsibility department. She had moved jobs to Gap Inc., but I connected with her because she was part of Net Impact while she was in college. And so again, it was like just see where your network leads through these different organizations and stuff.
I love that.
I did the rotational program. I hated it. That's what it comes down to. It was not a good fit for me because I wanted to do more sustainability. They kept telling me I could do it, and then the reality was that I couldn't really do it.
Mm.
So I ended up leaving that role after 10 months. It was an amazing experience. I learned a ton. I met a ton of people. It just wasn't the right fit for me. And that's pretty devastating, like you leave college thinking, I'm going to have my dream job. Like, this seems great. And then you learn that it's not really what you wanted it to be. So from there, I actually joined Net Impact and their headquarters, and the conference that I had attended throughout my whole college career, I helped put together and run. So that was for 2019's conference. And it was the coolest experience. And everyone knew me who worked there from being an active student leader. And so they really respected what opinions I brought to the table, like what perspective I had, having had that experience as a student working with Net Impact.
Mm.
So I did that. And then that was only until their conference finished. And then I ended up working for Done Good, which is this marketplace for socially responsible brands. And that was interesting because it was kind of social impact and fashion, but I actually worked more on the customer service and marketing end for it, but it was a very small team. So I did a lot of different things.
Can I ask you a question, Sam? Because I know we've talked about the positions you've had. For those who are interested in design, I don't know about them, but I watch Grownish, and in Grownish, Zoe had to realize that it wasn't design that she loved about fashion; it was more styling, right? For you, it was the social responsibility piece. Could you tell us? And I know we're getting ready to wrap up in like 30 seconds, what a typical day looked like for you doing social responsibility in the fashion industry.
So I can't say that I have actually actively um, done that at any sort of large company. I've kind of always been tangential to it from a like career perspective. So my days, let's just say at Athleta, were a lot of emailing with the people that we had that were at the actual factories in different countries. So a lot of emailing with them about the color of the pants and if it was the right color, which sample we liked best. And working cross-functionally with the designers and with merchandisers and with the technical stylist. I don't remember the right word, um, but who helped like fit the garment. We had fit models that would come in. So it was really cool to be a part of seeing the whole process come together and eventually seeing that product hit the stores. Um, but again, I felt that I was not close enough to the actual product or like the people who make the product. Um, and so that's why I prefer, but I think I learned through that process is I want to be closer to the impact.
So what impact are you trying to get closer to? And I think this is a great transition point into what you're doing right now. Um, what are you trying to get closer to, Sam?
So I really go, it goes back to supply chain for me. That was what my, college experience kind of was throughout college. I got to go on two amazing trips. One was to China to look at the supply chain there. We visited factories and um, embroidery artists and just got to kind of see what the supply chain for fashion looks like. A lot of people don't realize that machines don't really make our clothes. It's pretty much all still done by hand. There's very little that is done by machinery. And so I got to visit China and all expenses paid. I'm pretty sure. I think I might have paid just for half of airfare. We were there for 10 days. And then the following year, I got to go to India for 2 weeks, also through college. And again, I think it was maybe I just paid airfare. Um, but it was incredible, the opportunity. We visited artisans who were in villages and did everything by hand, naturally dyed products. And it was just a really, really incredible experience to see how intensive the process of making fabric or making a coat or anything really is. And I think that that experience made me place so much value on what gets done in country for the people who actually make our clothes. So what I learned is I kind of really want to be more active there,
Wow.
interact with that.
So
I don't know.
you weren't as close to that work, and I think that's really important, especially thinking about how so many people are underpaid, and are not, you know, living lives to the extent that they would like to because of how much time they put into making our clothing. And so I appreciate the passion there. And you haven't necessarily changed your mind, you've just changed your path. The passion is still there. So we're going to talk a bit about where you're at now. Um, and yeah, so if you want to talk about that as we wrap up here.
Yeah. And I know that I'm at least available to stick around for some questions if anyone has questions afterwards. But very quickly, so when I left the last role in January, I had been kind of working on a side project that seems a little bit out of nowhere. I have a fudge company now. And so it's called Mudge Fudge. I have a dog named Mudge who's sitting at my feet right now. And I adopted her in May. And the logical next step after having a dog named Mudge is to start making fudge. It rhymes. And I've always been creative in a lot of different ways and love cooking and all. But I started Mudge Fudge. And in July, we sold like $300 of fudge. It was just a fundraiser with my friends and family. And so I guess that also is like the social responsibility. There's always kind of been the social responsibility aspect to Mudge Fudge. We sold again in September, October, and then again for the holidays from Thanksgiving through New Year's. And during that sales period of Thanksgiving through New Year's, I sold like $900 of fudge. And that was kind of a light bulb went off where I was like, wow, I don't have a website. I'm not really doing a lot of marketing around this. And a lot of people are being repeat customers. They're buying it as gifts. It just seemed really like people liked it. So when I left my role, I decided to kind of take Mudge Fudge to a degree full time, but I'm really using it as a case study in sustainability and social responsibility. There are a lot of issues within the business just starting out that I know I want to improve, and I want to take our customers along with us on the ride to improve them. So, for example, our chocolate, I was just getting it locally, whatever I kind of could. It has some of it has palm oil in it. Palm oil has a lot of issues with child slavery for production. It's bad for the environment because um, I think it depletes some of our carbon banks that help us with global warming. So there are a lot of issues with palm oil. Even sustainably sourced palm oil is a little questionable. And so I'm kind of trying to own all of those things that are kinks we need to work out and how can we improve. So the social responsibility part definitely still stands. And here's my dog. She's awake
And
now.
while Sam is getting her dog, for those of you who are just going to be in fashion and who want to create your own lines, because right now is a perfect time for apparel. Apparel is thriving right now. If you're going to start your own business from your home as a teenager, you might want to consider where are my materials coming from? The companies that you're working with, that you're sending your designs to, the fabric, the quality of your fabric, and where are they who's making the product for you. So definitely keep that in mind.
Yeah. So, for example, we have been packaging our items in little tins, but it's like I don't know who made the tins and if they were paid a fair amount for their labor or where the metal was mined from. And so these are all big questions, right? It's going to be difficult to find the answers to these things, but the first step is to think about it. Once you have those questions, you can start, asking questions to the people who supply them. So I already know that I want to improve our chocolate and work with different suppliers to make sure it's fair trade and organic and, it's good for everyone. So good for everyone from, the people who grow it, that they're getting paid a fair wage and it's safe working conditions, and good for you as someone who may be eating it. Um, Good for you. I mean, it's fudge. It's not a health food, but you can feel better about what you're consuming and where you're putting your money. There's this whole idea in social responsibility about voting with your dollar, and so you have power as a consumer. So where are you going to, place your vote of like the type of world or the type of company you want to support?
I love that. Well, that's a perfect way to end. If you have any questions for Sam, now is the time to ask. She'll stick around. And we just have a few announcements. If you would like a gift for attending today's session, all you have to do is send an email to one of the three people who are listed here. Also, you can complete our poll, our evaluation link. We ask that you complete that, especially because this is our very last session. And upcoming, we have the annual Today's Girl, Tomorrow's Woman conference, which is scheduled for March 20th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. So save the date. I've already sent out the flyer. Make sure you register. That's also going to be over Zoom because we are still in a pandemic. And so we want everyone to stay safe. And we will tell you right now, you can find Much Fudge. Can you tell them the website really quickly?
Okay, so our website's still password protected because we're finishing up some legal stuff, but it's mudgefudge.com. But follow us on Instagram. We're at mudgefudgehomemade. And what we're really excited about is we're doing an International Women's Day flavor, and a portion of the profits from that flavor are going to benefit today's girl, tomorrow's woman. So
Awesome. Guys,
we'll
and
be announcing that within a few days.
we love that social responsibility with everything you do. So if you're in fashion, ask hard questions, ask the questions of the people who are distributing for you and producing for you. Thank you so much, Sam, for being here. For those of you who are here and going to stick around, feel free to ask questions. You could either drop it in the chat or you can take yourself off of mute and ask our dear Sam any question.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you for joining us.